Okay. So yeah, for folks who are just joining, we're introducing ourselves in the chat. We've got a lot of you today. Very excited for this session. We're going to kick off with an introduction of Irrational Labs. I will then pass to our senior behavioral scientist, Eva. Eva, do you want to wave so people know who you are? Wonderful. And then shout out also to Lindsay, who's here, who also worked on the study that we're going to present. In the audience, we have Bashir and Ryan and Brad and Katie from the Irrational Labs team. So we are representing in full force today. Okay, so maybe raise your hand or put in the chat if you've been to an Irrational Labs event or have taken our boot camp. Do we know you? So I'm assuming there'll be some folks. Wonderful, Rocky. Great. So it seems like we have two boot camps. Sharon's been to two boot camps. So wonderful. So Rational Labs, we are a behavioral science consulting group. My name is Kristen. I am the CEO and co-founder of it. We think about psychology of decision making, and we apply that to help companies basically help their customers in products from health, finance, tech. Think about small changes that have big effects. And so our team is a SWAT team of behavioral scientists. We got our start at Google, where we embedded there for 3 years, working with everyone from the self-driving car team to AdWords. We've moved on to generally work with large companies and small startups to apply behavior change insights and help people be happier, healthier, and wealthier. So today we also offer events. And so if you have not been on our event list, the way to get on it is to get on our newsletter. Our newsletter, we're very biased, but Brad runs that. It's a very fun way to keep up to date on all the behavioral science studies that come out and our case studies. And we'll pop that link in the chat. But the next one that we have coming up is with a senior behavioral scientist on our team, Monica, and it's designing for emotions. And so if you are a product manager, marketer, or designer, this one may be for you. You'll definitely learn a few hot tips from it. Anything else I missed, our Rational Labs team? Great. So if you're just coming in here, we are introducing ourselves in the chat. We've got a variety of folks coming in. But today, I'm going to move us on. We are going to talk about who do we trust more, experts versus AI? So Rational Labs, we've been doing a fair amount of research with how people relate to AI tools. If you have been awake on the internet, this is all the rage. Companies are really launching their AI tools. So maybe if you want to pop in the chat an AI tool that you've recently used. So you definitely probably have ChatGPT, but maybe you're on LinkedIn, where they have their AI tool. Intuit has an AI tool. Canva has an AI tool. Descript. There's so many AI tools. So pop into the chat any AI tool that you've used recently. Perplexity, great. Beautiful AI for slides. Otter, Copilot, amazing. So companies are basically building, think about all the engineers, all the work that goes into these AI tools. They are building these AI tools as if we trust them. And the question today is, how true is that? The reality is that it's actually getting a fair amount better. So you may have had this anchor and that it's not really that good, but in reality, actually what's happening is AI is fundamentally improving not only kind of their ability to act like a human, but their ability to help humans. And in kind of the study on the right, this was a study done with customer support agents, where real time they were giving advice to customer support agents to improve their answer and improve productivity. The cool thing with AI is it doesn't just improve productivity for low performing agents or people, it actually improves it across the board. Of course, it definitely improves it more for anyone who's low performing and needs some extra help. But overall, we all benefit from AI. And so then the question is, and this is a question that Eva's going to walk us through today, is what do experts think? How much do experienced financial planners trust AI-generated financial advice? And the hope through this, oh great, Eva started screen sharing. So the hope through this is that we will learn not only something about financial advisors, but that we'll basically have these deeper lessons about how you as a product manager, marketer, designer, and research can take these insights and apply them to your product. So we will use this study and help you kind of take that a logic leap forward and bring that back into your company. Sound good? This is all rhetorical because you're here. It's a Friday morning. We're gonna do this together. So right now I'm gonna pass to Eva and she's gonna get us kicked off. Thanks everyone for joining.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I'm really excited to share these results with you and talk about how we can apply the insights that we learned from these financial planners into your own work. And also want to give a big shout out to the Financial Planning Association chapters in Northern Cali for having Kristen speak and also for letting us experiment on you. So we had this amazing opportunity to actually ask this captive audience of hundreds of financial planners. We love a big sample size at Irrational Labs. And so we never pass up the opportunity to experiment and measure actual human behavior in the real world. And so when Kristen told me that she was going to give this talk, I was like, let's take advantage of this opportunity. Let's collect some data, right? So appreciate if anybody is on this call who was involved in that. Thank you for taking the survey. Thank you for completing it. And really the goals of what we wanted to understand were, one, this is a really changing landscape. So how much are financial planners currently using AI? What do they think of it? How are they behaving around it so that we can compare this over time? How much do they trust financial planning advice when it comes from an algorithm versus a human? And really what barriers are keeping people from trusting and using AI so that we can provide recommendations on how to help people, you all as employers or people hesitant about using and adopting AI tools, how can we basically use those insights to help create actionable insights to improve it? And so how did we do this? What did the study look like? So we told the financial planners that two of their friends, Alex and Taylor, had just gotten some financial planning advice. They based on their current financial situations. And they knew that you were the financial planning experts. They want to know, is this advice good? I don't know why they didn't come to you directly, but they got some advice and now they want to ask, do you think this is good? Is this valid? So we showed you Alex and Taylor's financial snapshot, things like their income, their goals, their debt, their expenses, and we showed you the financial recommendations that they were given. But the key here is that we told half of financial planners that the advice that they were reviewing for their friends Alex and Taylor was developed by a certified expert, another human financial planner with 15 years of experience. And we told the other half of the group that the advice they were reviewing came from a company called Kendall Finance's AI. And that technology basically was used to deliver the financial recommendations, taking into account your friend Alex and Taylor's situation. There in reality was no difference in the advice that was reviewed by the planners, right? Half the planners thought the advice was developed by a person, half were told it was developed by AI. And we wanted to know, how much does the messenger matter in terms of what people think about this advice? Would the planners view the advice differently based on who it came from? And so after they reviewed the advice, we asked things like, how personalized do you think this advice was to your friends' situations? How useful are these recommendations in helping them reach their goals? How much do they trust this advice? Are you willing to endorse this advice using your own certificate of financial planning? And if you would change anything, what would you change? And I wonder if you all think that there was a difference between perceptions for this advice that was actually the same. You can just drop in the chat. Great. Yep. Okay, it seems like we're aligned and you're right. So if you guess that it does differ, you're correct. Even though the advice is exactly the same, planners who thought the advice was coming from an algorithm trusted it a little bit less, about 12% lower. And this aligns with a phenomenon we see all the time in behavioral science, which is called the messenger effect. So our perceptions change based on who we think a message is coming from. You're obviously more likely to trust your doctor on what you should do about your health behavior than your best friend who uses PubMed, right? And the messenger effect does this by relying on heuristics. So the advice can be exactly the same, but people are making a judgment about the messenger based on their prior mental models or experiences that they have with AI or with planners. And we see a similar pattern in how willing financial planners are to endorse AI recommendations, which also makes sense, right? Because you have a clear mental model of the training that goes into getting this financial planning certification. You know exactly what inputs are going into the decisions that you're making versus something developed with a new AI technology you're not as familiar with. So the endorsement, especially when we named their actual certification, was a little bit lower. And though this was a smaller percentage, financial planners also found the advice from AI a little bit less personalized when they thought it was coming from AI. So we could just stop here, right, and say people don't like AI, a financial planner specifically. We could say they don't like recommendations as much as human recommendations, but we want to dig deeper. We want to understand what's driving that difference in perception between human advice and AI, especially when the advice is exactly the same. So why do financial planners think the advice is lower quality? We could hypothesize that people don't trust AI, they don't think it's useful, and that's driving the lack of use. But is it? Oh, and I love that question, Sharon. In the end of the presentation, I talk a lot about threats, so I will definitely come back to that. But when we ask the folks who never used AI why they have not used it, we saw that actually the people that don't use it mostly just don't understand it, and they would use it if they knew how. And this is really interesting because it means that just because people say they have less trust or think AI is less personalized does not mean that they have stronger opinions about it. This is not really about people being against AI necessarily. It could be that they don't know enough or have experience with it. And why is this good news? It's good news because it's not about attitudes, preferences, or beliefs about the AI being evil or not helpful. Instead, it singles out a behavioral design opportunity to increase trust by changing the context that someone has. So this includes things like increasing familiarity and norms. And the rest of the talk I'm going to go through is really about how you can increase your customers, your employees, and your own usage of AI. And we're going to use data from these financial planners to help identify those opportunities. So thankfully, we have some cues from behavioral science that can help us understand those barriers to using AI so we can help increase adoption. And the first that we see across all human behavior is that even when people want to do a thing, they don't always follow through. I know that I want to go to the gym more to feel happier and meditate more to be calmer and set up for retirement more so I'm, set. But I don't always do those things, and there's a gap between the intention and the action that we take. We know that the benefits are good. We see in our data here that people actually think that AI will be good for their field and for them personally, but they're not using it. And that's because the status quo and what we're currently doing is hard to move away from. And we see that illustrated. This is really interesting, right? The gap between what financial planners think and what they do is pretty big. So the vast majority of financial planners that we talk to think that AI would improve their daily work and the field of financial planning. But then only a portion of those folks are using it regularly. So if 86% of AI 86% of folks think AI is useful, but then a third are using it weekly. If it's so amazing and it could improve the field, why aren't we using that? Beyond that, you could say maybe they don't know where it would improve their work. But when we ask people what parts of your jobs could be automated with AI, they can even identify that data analysis, pattern recognition, other parts of their job actually could be handed off. Yet again, usage is low. And this is common. The intention action gap can really explain why you can think something is good for you and not actually do it. So one study showed just how big this gap is. When people attended a financial education seminar to learn more about 401ks, they were asked, will you enroll in a 401k plan now that you know how good it is for you? And this even occurs with like when people match 401ks, like some people don't enroll after that, but people said, yes, absolutely, I will positively enroll. I'm going to do it ASAP. And what actually happened? We checked in later, right? 6 months later, and only 14% of those enthusiastic folks who care about their financial health did enroll. And this happens across industries, across behavior. And so thinking that AI will improve my work day to day and also my field might not be enough to increase my usage. And this is huge, right? A meta-analysis looking at 422 studies found that only 70% of behavior cannot be explained just by intentions alone. We need more. So we know intentions are necessary, right? We're not saying don't make intentions, but they're often not enough. So I also bet that folks have the intention to use ChatGPT more, but when I've done everything in the status quo of like what I'm used to doing without it, it's hard to switch over. So intentions are great and we need them, but they don't carry us all the way. So how can we bridge this gap between what people intend to do and what they actually do? If you've seen any of our other talks about the 3B framework, which I'm sure some of you are, some double dippers in the boot camp definitely know these ones. We can essentially do two things, which is reduce barriers to using AI, and we can also amplify the benefits of using AI. And those are two strategies that really effectively motivate people to bridge this intention action gap. So you saw from the 401k example, even when people want to do something, they have a hard time moving away from it. So how do we make a new technology simple enough that people can try? And how do we make it appealing enough that they want to try? And it's really necessary to take away any barriers that exist in users trying AI to drive adoption. So anything that has friction, steps, a sign-up flow, a complicated way of learning to use it, even one additional click will get in the way of trying it. So the reason why Siri was so successful is it's integrated into an iPhone. I don't have to get an iPhone and then download Siri to use it. It's already there, right? I can talk to it anytime. Google automatically gives you a summary now of search results. You don't have to ask for a summary. And ChatGPT makes it easy to get started with prompts, but it's not fully integrated in our workflows, so it still has potentially lower usage. And making something the default like Siri did is really effective. It's why Google paid Apple $18 billion to be built into their workflows and be the default search engine, because they understood that people will not open a new search engine when they, are about to Google something or look something up. So they still just go with what automatically comes up. And that was a worthwhile trade-off for them. And so my hunch is that some of us type a search into a browser to find something. But if we want to use AI, we would think about, okay, what AI do I want to use? Is it ChatGPT? Is it Gemini? Okay, now I have to go to another window and actually open it. And that small barrier, just a click, prevents us from using it more. So if it seems like people don't want to use your tool or your app, it could just be because it requires an extra click or it's new. And if you're trying to get people to use and adopt a new tool, it's critical to examine that end-to-end flow. If it's hard, confusing to do, or has too many steps, people won't be able to bridge that gap. It needs to be integrated into workflows and also appealing enough that people will overcome any hurdles of doing it. So how do we do that? How do we make things more appealing? Well, one way to motivate people is to make the benefits really salient and really present. So some ways companies have thought about this is when Alexa came out, people had mixed feelings about it, right? Having a little robot that listens to you all day in your house. But Prime knew that and basically was like, we're going to have these Prime deals and basically give them away. They're so cheap, right? And that exciting discount of also this exclusivity of I'm waiting for Prime Day and then I'm Alexa's everywhere. Let people basically adopt a new technology without thinking too much about it because it was such a good deal. And Grammarly, among many other AI tools, offers free versions to let people try something without any financial commitment. It emphasized how much better, they would look sending an email without typos, but also let people try it for free. So the key to overcoming that status quo, or what we're currently doing, is in part leading with benefits, but also reducing any friction to trying something. Regarding AI, which I'm sure you all have seen, it's really about curiosity that has motivated people. So there's this new technology. What will it say if I ask it this? Can I challenge it to see if I could beat the AI at something, right? And it sounds fun. Framing using AI like a challenge, you're making it appealing and people want to use it more. But in the long term, right, when the novelty wears off, integrating into workflows will be most effective to build regular habits of use. There's other strategies we can leverage too. So one thing we know about human behavior is that we're highly influenced by what people do around us. And this applies to what technology that we use as well, along with many other behaviors. So we're highly motivated and to act in line with what others are doing. And sometimes we have the wrong perception of what people are doing, and we look for cues for what others are doing to guide our behavior. So one really famous seminal study about binge drinking found in 2002 that college students overestimated how much other college students binge drink. And those that thought more people were binge drinking were drinking more. And so campaigns that specifically focused on trying to correct that misperception to say, actually, it's less than you think, actually helped reduce some of the binge drinking on campuses. So aligning the perceived norm, if it's incorrect, with the actual norm can help people act more in line with what people are actually doing. So what do financial planners think that others doing? Is there a mismatch between how much people think others are using it and how much I'm using it? There is. We saw this incorrect perception of the norm, right? When we asked planners how often they were using AI, about 32% said they were using it at least weekly. But when we asked, okay, what about your other colleagues? Are they using it regularly? They said only about 22%. So they underestimated the number and said that other people are using it less. And that can actually affect behavior, right? If I have a misperception that not a lot of my peers and colleagues are using it, then I might be less likely to do it. And we see that social norms can actually be leveraged and affect AI uptake reflected in the literature. So one study looked at what factors predicted when a driver would accept an AI recommendation on where to go next. So Lyft and Uber drivers, they might resist or not trust the algorithmic recommendations on rides or suggested routes. And the researchers wanted to know what predicts whether or not someone will take an AI rec or not. And norms were a big part of this. So two things were strong predictors. The first was, have other drivers taken this recommendation and can vouch for it? Is there social proof that this works? And the other is, does my past experience with this route or location align with the recommendation I'm getting? So we see here that what our peers are doing and what we have done in the past are both really influential on our adoption of tools like recommendations from AI. How do we apply this? How do we drive adoption? So the best way to challenge existing norms, if they're incorrect, is to show people the accurate norm if it's in line with what you want people to do. So if no one at your company is using AI, don't share that statistic if you want people to use it, right? But if more people are using it, then actually you could think about sharing that statistic. If you want to know exactly how to think about norms, we can talk more about it. But another way is to make private use public. So recently I saw on TikTok that during the Olympics, Google Gemini had this campaign where they were showing Olympians actually interacting with Google Gemini to like develop chants for their friends to say for, when they were competing. And that's one way, right, albeit a very expensive way of making a private behavior of looking something up more public. And we see that it works when we make private behavior. Oh, sorry. Am I on the wrong screen? Okay, great.
I think for folks, yeah, this is my mistake too, is you actually, and there's the top two tabs. And so you want to be on the Eva screen tab on Zoom. I think this is a new update they just did.
Okay, great. So I don't have to do anything. Great. I shouldn't be looking at the comments anyway, but I really like seeing what you guys are putting in. It's too interesting for me. So I'm trying to be in both places at once. And it really works. This study shows that making a private behavior, like how long you run even, public to your friends actually increases how long you run. So seeing a peer run an additional 10 minutes can make people run about 5.3 minutes more. I don't think this would work for me, but some people are more motivated by peer influence for exercise. I would never run, but we are really affected by what people around us are doing. And we do this ourselves at AI. So I stole this screenshot of something that Kristen shared. We have this channel. We actually have multiple channels where we post showing how we use AI to solve problems, where we delegate tasks, how we prompt it differently. And we have these working sessions on Fridays to actually troubleshoot and learn new tools together. And what this does is actually build the norm that this is something others at Irrational Labs are doing it and normalizes it and also makes it a more public behavior. But even if you think everyone is doing something, even if I know that Kristen is using AI all the time, it might still be hard to try it if I'm not comfortable doing so, right? So what we know from behavioral science is that when people don't know how to do a thing, or they don't know what will happen if they do, or they might not have comfort with it, they tend to avoid it because ambiguity is uncomfortable. We crave certainty. We tend to do things that we feel most familiar with. And that makes sense, right? Starbucks is popular because we know we're getting the same thing. You could be missing out on like maybe the best coffee shop ever right next to Starbucks, but you don't want to take the risk. And so you go with Starbucks in a new town. So most coffee is similar. We know that that extra level of familiarity leads us to go with the brand that we know. So it makes sense that people are averse to the ambiguity of AI because people don't really know how it works. And that's why low usage of AI for these planners can be explained in part by comfort. When we ask people how comfortable users are with AI tools for work tasks, we find that about half of planners are not comfortable using AI in their day-to-day work. And as mentioned earlier, there is some research that shows familiarity increases comfort, and that lack of comfort here is likely due to not using AI enough. So how do we build comfort in using AI? The key is really to think about how to get people to try it, right? Familiarity makes people more comfortable. And there's strategic ways that we can think about making that easier. But the other part that's really key when it comes to AI is giving people control and agency in using AI. So the way that you frame it and the way that you let people be involved in the process makes people more comfortable. So when we think about how to increase exposure and familiarity, there's some good insights about what works in teaching people new things. There's a lot of smart people on the call, so I'm going to turn this question to you. What do you think is more effective at getting people to learn? Do you think a 1-hour lecture jam-packed with insights, or a 1-hour workshop with less content and more participation? Great. Yeah, people are even adding design elements like even a smaller workshop. Great. Everyone's correct. Active learning for the win. Love it. And hopefully I am incorporating enough of that with you all too. So if you said workshop, you're right. When we look at the field of education, we see that when people are taught in a more hands-on, involved manner, they have agency in the learning process, they tend to engage more, they tend to perform better, they tend to feel more confident. And when I say active learning, what does that mean? What are components of active learning? Put that in the chat too. Love it. Reflection, making mistakes, teaching each other, practice. Yeah, got some educators in the audience for sure. Yeah, so you're right. That's the point. By involving students and listeners directly, you're actually increasing their learning because they're an active versus a passive participant. And that's how memory works. Memory is more encoded if you recall something yourself. So I can tell you the state capital of Vermont, but if I ask you it, you'll think about it, you'll engage with it, you'll remember it better. And we see that this works in education, right? It raises students' grades, it reduces failure rates. So when you think about trying to move your employees or your customers into AI, how do you think about working on topics together, applying concepts in real time, group work? So basically what that means is stop reading about using AI and actually start using it, right? Don't Google prompts you can use for ChatGPT, but try and actually use prompts to try and figure it out yourself. Because by doing this, you're actually breaking through to a higher level of understanding of how to use AI. And as I mentioned in our AI sessions at Irrational Labs, we do this, we involve folks directly. So when it comes to incorporating AI at your company or even setting a norm, it's helpful to encourage hands-on, exploratory, low-stakes practice. Another way we can think about making people feel more comfortable is to give them a sense of control. So I love this example called the Betty Crocker effect. Let me know if you know what it is in the chat, but it illustrates really how much people really value feeling in control. So it refers to a marketing strategy that was used to address why Betty Crocker wasn't selling prepackaged mix. It has everything you need. It's got powdered eggs. You don't have to do anything, zero work, right? But despite the convenience, they weren't selling well. And after doing some research, the company found out that people felt guilty about using the mixes. They were like, is it actually homemade? They didn't feel like they had that personal touch while baking. So how did they address this? What did they do? Any guesses on how they solved this problem? Yep. Add an egg. Great. Yeah, they changed the instructions so all you had to do was add 1 egg. And this is a small change, right? But it gives consumers a greater sense of involvement in the baking process, making them feel like they're contributing more to the final product. And in behavioral science, we call this the IKEA effect. And it essentially means that we attribute more value to things that we feel we have a part in creating. And Erin already got that. That's the IKEA effect. You're exactly right. And we can see this applied in AI as well. So How much do you like this image of a bird eating a popsicle in a laboratory? Maybe not that much. I won't, take it personally. But if you had refined it in multiple rounds with AI and spent time and energy creating it, like I did last night at 10 p.m., you might like it more, right? And that's what we see in the research. People tend to value AI generated content more when they are an active participant in refining it. So one study in Germany showed that participants valued images more if they worked to refine the images over and over again with AI compared to receiving an AI generated output without being involved in the process. I don't even know what kind of bluebird it is. That's a great question. And thank you for everyone's honesty of not liking it that much. But when we're thinking about how this can be applied, you could think about asking your users to help train your AI, right? So you would think that people like this hyper personalized, like my AI is exactly trained on me. It knows everything that I want and need. But when you ask people to train AI on their preferences, you're actually asking them to add an egg, right? You're making it more appealing because they feel invested in it. They feel like they've done something to contribute to it. And another way of giving people a sense of control is asking them if they want to use it, right? Opting in. So giving the people the option to use AI makes them feel more positively towards it. So we saw this study where researchers worked with software developers and they said, you have this deadline coming up. How willing will you be to use this AI coding assistant? They either had just seen another coder working on a task get interrupted by a robot who offered to help and basically the coder was working. The robot said, hey, you look like you're running out of time. Do you want me to take over? A little bit rude, probably, right? I might feel a little defensive. Or the coder had the option to use the robot, but the robot was not going to interrupt me. And what they found was that coders who watched a pushy robot offer help without asking did not like it. They liked it much better and were more willing to ask for help when the coder initiated help than when the robot offered. And the takeaway here is really that people like to feel like they're in control, especially when working with smart technology. And we see this right within the field of financial planners. If someone asks if I need help without being asked, especially in a field where I'm an expert, if I'm a software developer, it can make me feel like my abilities are being questioned. It can make me want to reject that help. And yes, I think in part that's why people don't like Clippy, but also Clippy was just kind of a creepy looking icon. I love the reference. But this is really important when you're thinking about designing AI systems. So while not everything needs to be opt-in, giving users a sense of control, like Google offering email responses as suggestions rather than auto-filling them, or Google Maps asking, we found another route, do you want that alternative route instead of just rerouting you? That really makes people feel like the technology is more approachable and less threatening. And I'm sure the opposite side, right, of autocorrect in my iPhone just drives me crazy. I'm like, ask if I want to actually say that thing, because that's actually not what I mean. And so coders don't want a pushy robot, but how about financial planners? Do they feel threatened by AI taking their jobs? What we saw is that no, they weren't really worried about it. So this is the big question, though, that I want to ask. So 62% of planners are not really concerned that they'll be replaced with AI. But is that good, right? Is it good not to be worried about being replaced by AI? If we think about it, it's possible that AI takes over our jobs, every single one of us on this call. Hopefully not. I like my job. I'm enjoying this time with you guys, but it's possible. But if you're worried about that happening, that creates a lot of cognitive dissonance and possibly a rejection of AI. So the question is, how much fear is good? And if we have too much fear, we might avoid AI. We might even change industries to something that we don't think is replaceable. But if we don't have enough fear, we might not even try AI, thinking that we are irreplaceable. And it seems like financial planners are in the not so scared camp, which may be leading to their lower adoption of AI. So we'd likely move them into the middle, since a little bit of fear and awareness may motivate increased usage. And it'd be great after we finish up to hear what you all think in terms of replaceability in different fields, because I'm really curious about how that varies. Digging a little deeper, this is actually really funny. We see this funny representation of overconfidence, right? So of the people who think AI definitely will take over our jobs, only 2% of those folks think that they personally could ever be replaced, but they think that their colleagues are a little bit more likely to be replaced. So this illustrates what we call the better than average effect. How many people here think that they're a better than average driver? Yeah. So what's interesting is that we're all walking around thinking that we're better than average drivers, right? Like everybody thinks that we're better than the average. And that's not right. People are really, really confident about this one. And it's funny how many things that this applies to, right? But this better than average effect might actually deter people from investing their time in trying AI tools. If I think that I'm so irreplaceable compared to my poor replaceable colleagues, I may be less interested in using AI tools. But as Kristen said at the beginning, this might negatively impact me because it's improving productivity across levels, right? So people are actually more effective and more and finding improvements in their own work when they're using it correctly and integrating into their workflows. So thinking that I don't need AI may ultimately make me less valuable and more replaceable in the future. Not that I'm trying to scare everybody, but just think about that overconfidence when you're thinking about your own colleagues as well. I will note that there's one area that people feel confident about not being replaceable, and that's in their personal emotional interactions with clients. So this is a widely held belief across different fields. Many people think the connection and the relationship that we have is not something that AI could take over. And that's cool because it's an opportunity, right? You can lean into that. If the nuts and bolts of financial planning are more easily automated, you might want to consider what your value add is to clients. How can you build loyalty, relationships? How can you emphasize maybe the sunk cost of already being established with your company or brand? How do you emphasize the switching costs of moving to somewhere else? How do you think about what your value add is if automation makes it easier to give some of the products or the services that you provide? And banks are thinking a lot about this now. It's really easy to find out like who has the best high yield savings account. It's even easy to move my money from one bank to another. But banks are trying to think about alternative approaches to keeping their clients. And if you all are not thinking about how easy it is to switch costs or find the best fit for me, we think that you should be. And if you need help about this, talk to us because we think about this all the time. So my challenge to you all is try AI, do it, use it, choose one tool and one task type. Our colleague Carl the other day said he used it to fix his toilet. He was like, I'm going to see if I can do this without being a plumber. But try it to send some emails, try to draft some, experiment with different prompts, right? Sometimes when I am doing something that I could easily, buy a service to do, I see if I can figure out how to do it with ChatGPT. Try it in a work task, see what the results are, see if you can make it better. And if you're trying to get your customers or employees to adopt it, make it public. Show that others are using it. Think about the norm that you're creating. And if people are not using it, maybe don't talk about the fact that no one's using it if you want more people to use it. And finally, right, this is a fast-paced field. And if you want to increase adoption and retention of AI, stay in the know. There's papers coming out every day about human adoption of AI and how it's integrated and how it's positioned. And if you need help in this rapidly changing landscape, we think a lot about monetization of AI, positioning, perceptions, adoption, retention, people's trust in it. Like this is something that we are currently working on with a lot of clients. So ask us, we can help with this too. And don't worry, because over time, it will become the norm too, right? Most people will be exposed to AI, and things that we used to be skeptical about will become the norm. So the way that we used to store data is not the way that we store data today, and people had a lot of hesitation around it. The way in which we Venmo each other and send money back and forth, people were really freaked out about the beginning. The way that we talk to chatbots for customer service, all these things were once really brand new and created a ton of hesitation, and now they're the status quo. So if you don't get on board now, it will become the norm later. So try and get on board before everyone's using it and we still haven't, right? And I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions because I know the chat has been super, super active. And so with that, we'll put this up. And I wanted to just say too, that we are highly responsive, and I obviously love talking about this stuff. So feel free to send me an email. Feel free to let me know how this is going at your company and how you're thinking about it. And I'll open up for questions.
Great. Thanks everyone. We want to give either a silent or take yourself off mute and give Eva a round of applause. And thank you again to the financial advisors who are in the room,
Great job, Eva.
and especially Eric Flett, who invited us to speak, and to everyone who took the survey. So grateful. So for folks who want to stay on, please stay on. We're going to have I think these discussions are actually sometimes more interesting, more fun, because we get to hear from you. If you are, we will be emailing out kind of the next event, so you can stay in touch with us, which is on the right side there. I think the first question we are going to take is from Laura, who asked about active learning versus does it have to be live? So, in our current world, we've gone to online learning. We've had all the MOOCs, the Coursera's, etc. And so what does that mean for learning in general? I actually think we have some uplifting news that is related to AI. I'm going to put in the chat. Oh, I put it to somebody specific. Let me give it to everyone. So, you can think what you want about Elon Musk, but he's at the forefront, and he's developed a AI tutor that is for one-on-one learning for small kids and older kids. And the idea here is that you actually have an interaction callback. So one thing that has been proven to work is one-to-one tutoring. Obviously in schools, that's really tough to do. You have an average of 23 kids in a class, very difficult to get one-to-one learning. And so with AI, can you actually scale learning? I know Ryan as an educator is probably being like, I don't know, but it's coming, and probably by the time that if you have small kids that they're in school, that this will be something more of a norm to have the optimal type of learning, which is this active learning scaled on a one-to-one basis online, so we don't have to do it live. Okay, and Eric says your school district is trialing it. Very cool. So Ryan, if you ever come to any of our workshops, we do, Ryan is definitely an active learning where we're doing a lot of callbacks and the intro calls for our boot camp as well. So we're now going to take additional questions. What is the timeline? We're going to go a little bit back what is the timeline to move from relying on trust models to people trusting in a new technology? I think what we think we may do is ask this type of a question, like how much do you think your job will be replaced by AI over the next years, and actually get to some interesting analysis in 5 to 10 years that says, we're there, right? Where people actually are either because their job has changed or the sentiment has changed, and we would ask some battery of questions over time. So I think, by Moore's law, you could say it's sooner than we think. But in reality, if you listen to kind of the history of the internet, it wasn't overnight that we adopted the internet. It's a wild history that says you just imagine that people would adopt the telephone and the internet immediately when we figured out that we could reach people and go online. It took a lot of technology, privacy, security, innovations for all of that to come together for us to move beyond AOL chat. And even AOL chat, took emphasis to get there. Great. Anyone else see a question? I kind of lost where my other questions were. So Eva, Lindsay, if you guys see any questions that you want to pick out, or if people want to take themselves off mute and ask. We had a fair amount of questions in the chat on highly regulated industries. I think this is, as you saw in the first chart, we had about a quarter of people who said that, or some percentage of people who said that they just didn't trust AI. We had a majority of people who said they weren't aware, and then we had another segment of people said, I would use it if I was allowed to. And so these structural barriers are definitely real. It doesn't really affect this study, except for the last, like, are you using it or not questions. But the initial finding of do you trust AI or not isn't really affected by kind of these regulation barriers. It's more affected by kind of our anchoring and our mental model of what is AI and how much do we trust it relative to other like humans, etc. But I do have hope, and I think that's kind of what there are enterprise versions of things. We don't recommend putting PII, which is personal identifiable information, into the chatbot, so you can get actually interesting information if you're just anonymizing it. This is a classic tactic with any type of data, that you're anonymizing and taking out PII and randomizing it. And so there's likely a lot of opportunity to have enhanced security measures in the current environment. And of course, we'd expect that it would continue to change.
There's some interesting questions about, well, I liked this question of, regardless of AI phobia, how do you manage with BSci phobia? So moving clients past, wow, behavioral science is interesting, to yes, let's do a project, which I think Kristen could speak well to.
Yeah, sorry, who asked that? Where did that come from? Oh, great. Courtney,
That
thank
came from
you.
me, Kristen.
Great. Thank you
We have
so
a lot of
much.
people interested in helping boost AI adoption, but then when you tell them how, they go, "Oh, I'll get back to you."
Yes. Uh, and that's really the intention action gap. I'm gonna slight tangent and then we'll come back. There's this wild, I don't know if folks have been following the Google monopoly story, which Google has an antitrust case against them for basically paying Apple $18 billion to be the default. By the way, this is per year, not in aggregate, to be the default on iPhone. So, or all Apple devices. And so what this implies is that, any small change that people have to go through is very difficult. Even going to a separate website to type into a search engine, Google fundamentally understood that need to be integrated into our workflows for people to actually adopt Google search. And, I think that's a general lesson, is that we have to make new tools, new technologies fundamentally easy, or as easy as what they're currently doing, is what people are currently doing. And same, for behavioral science, we all like to understand our own psychologies, and we're interested to know why and how we behave, why and how our husband or wife is behaving as they do. And so, there has to be some motivation to get people over some of these hurdles. And in the beginning, when we started Google's behavioral economics group, this was around 2015, people didn't know the word behavioral economics. And so we were kind of really increasing motivation. At this point, people know kind of the word behavioral economics. If they've used it at all, they understand that it can have interesting and powerful effects. There's also a lot to know, so this is not like a one-hit wonder sort of thing. It's complex and nuanced, just like human behavior is. And so we first get people interested, and then we reduce barriers to adoption. And reducing barriers tends to mean things like the 3B model. Right. The world is extremely complex of biases, and yet we're simplifying it to a 3B model of behavior change. Well, it turns out that in order for people to understand and get excited about something, it may have to be a little bit simpler than a Wikipedia list of 200 biases. And so, these kind of frameworks help people understand it and put it into their mental model. So I think same with AI, we have to get people interested in it, not scared, and then reduce the barriers to adoption of it. And that typically does mean kind of integrating in the workflows and making it fundamentally easier to do. It also means, and I think one of the biggest things that Eva talked about was familiarity. So if you start using it, it's not about intellectually knowing about behavioral science or AI, it's about using it. And Sharon, who's joined a lot of our boot camps, knows this as well, that, as soon as you practice it, you do a behavioral diagnosis, you put pen to paper, things become less scary. We're kind of moving it closer to us, and we'll get more excited and get more expertise.
There's one question that I just wanted to name because I think it's really interesting, is Mark B asked if he said he expected a larger trust gap, and that if we had any benchmarks or reference data from the other studies or fields to help contextualize this. And I'll let folks answer that. But I think one thing that was interesting is that we varied also the complexity. We had two scenarios. We didn't really talk about this part of the study, but we showed people a more simple scenario for Alex and a more ambiguous scenario for Taylor of financial situations. So more things to consider, a little bit like less information about their financial background. And you could go a bunch of different ways in terms of the financial recommendations we gave. And we wanted to see sort of, does the trust and personalization and quality of the advice differ when you're thinking about it from AI or human, if it's more complicated of a prompt, if it's more complicated advice. And interestingly, we saw that it didn't change. It wasn't significantly different. So for both complicated and more simple financial situations, people had the same difference in trust, which I thought was quite interesting. But I'm not sure if there's benchmarks or reference data from other folks in terms of the trust gap. My understanding is that it differs based on the field and it differs based on people's experience with AI as well. So there is research that shows that people tend to trust AI more when they use it more and they have more familiarity with it. And when they don't, it's lower. But don't know if other folks want to chime in on that one too.
My hunch and Irrational Ops team, feel free to jump, is that things like, when you call into a support line right now and they want to do self-help support, you've had that experience before personally, and you know that it's probably not as good as talking to a human. And so having our own reference points, and if they're positive and we've simulated and we get exposure to it, this is great. If we have one negative reference point, this will overwhelm some of the likelihood to try or trust it. And so kind of as Eva said, and behavioral science knows, like, context matters. And so it does matter what field it is and likely the reference point you have for this. And if you have one negative experience, this negativity bias could overwhelm and drive down lower trust or higher trust if you have a positive experience with it. I think Alyssa asked a really nice question here, is like, so, AI is kind of a boost. It's like making us better. Is there a problem it's solving? And that's a very valid question. I think for product teams to really focus on when they're building new AI solutions is, what problem are we solving? Back to basics. Because just having kind of AI, actually, if you look at many of these kind of promos for new AI tools, it says AI tool, AI powered solution, like you're using AI 4 times to describe the AI tool. We still need to be back to basics to have a real problem it's solving. That said, it's a nice insight as well to say maybe we lead with the problem. There's something called solution aversion, which is if I pitch you a solution to something, you're like, I don't really believe that solution, Kristen. This could be maybe the politicization of our society today, where we're pitching each other different solutions. But more likely than not, we agree on the problem. More likely than not, we think that, like, people probably should be healthier. We should, like, be better off. In general, it's that we disagree on the solution to how to get there. And so it's a very nice and interesting idea. And in AI, should we refocus on the problem to get people to buy into the solution? Great. Have we started collecting, and Irrational Labs folks, jump into if you see a question that you want to bring up. Have you started collecting what are the most common use cases for how planners are using AI? We have not. I would say, I think the Financial Planning Association of Northern California, that this is, I gave a talk there 2 times over the last few years, don't remember exactly how long. But typically we're not working directly with the financial advisors. If you guys are interested, we're happy to talk. We do think basically people are making, we want people in their financial lives to make more rational decisions. It is very easy to make not rational decisions in our financial world, whether it be because we see market returns and we take our money out, or because we are maybe potentially more conservative after an event that we just had, or if you just had a child, etc. So there are different reasons for us to maybe act a little bit less rationally, and it's extremely important to have financial guidance to help kind of us optimize our financial lives kind of across the spectrum. So we are, and there are, if you were to think about one of the most aggressive things that the behavioral science field doesn't like, it's these kind of risk scores, which ask you to say, how risky are you? How much risk do you want to take? This is regulated by the SEC. And yet it's so terrible because people have different biases on this. If you're a woman, you answer you are less risky, and then you get less returns on your financial portfolio. If you've had a bad day, or it's morning, or the stock market has gone down, you're going to answer less risky that day, and it's going to set your portfolio for life of how risky you will be. And so,
If you're
hopefully,
hungry,
huh?
if you're hungry or
If you're
impoverished.
hungry. And so the hope is that maybe machine learning AI can actually bring a little bit more kind of rationality to these large financial decisions that we're making. One big hope for the financial market in general is that it helps us compare loan prices, credit card rates, so that people are not just going with the first thing that they see, because it's actually really hard right now to make good financial decisions, because you'd have to call all the banks to get to submit your loan. Like, that is wild and takes so much time. If we can reduce the barrier to these types of financial decisions, like getting a better loan or credit card, more people may optimize, and maybe rates would even come down. Because it will be in a higher competitive market, and banks and credit card companies will have to fight for our loyalty in a little bit different way. So a prediction would be we expect to see banks and credit card and overall like have more loyalty incentives, because they're going to have to keep us as their customer if switching costs become lower. And again, this is stuff where MLAI will likely support consumer decision making. It'll also kind of support a market that is maybe more competitive, and banks and others can actually help, can create business models around this as well.
I just want to name that Sharon, I think, had her hand up, and I know we only have a couple more minutes. So yeah.
Great. Sharon, why don't you do a quick question, and then we will end with the folks in the room.
Great. So there's this balance between make it super appealing and motivating to get people to adopt, like, hey, it's summer, plan your vacation with Perplexity. And then there's this is my daily habit, and it's not so sexy, but it's going to lead to long-term habit. So how do you balance that?
What a great question. What a great question. So if AI is leading with check the weather, which is my habit behavior, I'm just like, I know the weather. Why would I come to you? So we do have to have a combination of both, whereas basically you want to get people highly motivated to come and do something terrible like create an account. Oh my gosh, it's so much friction. And then help them do the daily behaviors that they would want to do that would bring them back, such as weather and news, and help you with your work. And so I think we will see a world that is much more about helping people in their daily lives. My dream is that the AI will help unload the dishwasher or do my laundry, but I think we're still far from that. But maybe it will help me as it will improve my email writing. It will improve my timeliness and my calendar. Okay, with that, we are very excited to have you guys hang out with us for this time. We're very grateful to the financial planners who took the study. And at Rational Labs, we do a ton of work with behavior change, and specifically these days around kind of AI behavior change. So if you're building something interesting, hit us up. And on that, we will look for the recording and for a link to the next event. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. A shout out to Eva and Lindsay for an incredible work on this study. I know this seems like it's just, here are some slides. This is a lot of work under the covers, and really, really appreciate the team behind this.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the engaging discussion, and have a great weekend.